Welcome everyone. I can't see your faces, so I'm assuming everyone's there. But welcome to a climate action planning webinar on creating climate mindset. Um, I was going to say just before we join in, this is supposed to be somewhat of a casual and dynamic conversation between some really fun and amazing people. And so if you have any questions throughout this time, just drop it in the chat, any comments, any inspiring ideas, all is welcome. Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Patty Martin. I go by she, her pronouns. And I am currently running this webinar from the ancestral lands of the Northern Pomo, where you would know it as Northern California in the United States. So I am a scientist, I am an artist, I am a poet, I am a human connector. I am also a climate consultant at the Travel Foundation, and I am really, really tickled to be here with both Nina and Tessa today, talking about climate action planning and mindset. So as we approach the end of COP, there was a few things I wanted to just start off the base by saying. Number one, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I want to normalize and make room for the fact that most of us don't have the ability to fully tune into COP. And so if you aren't aware that it's even going on or have only been able to read the weekly updates or the daily updates, like that's totally fine. But really the hope is on this webinar today is to take momentum that we have and move it forward and to really give you a mindset that can allow you to enact change continually. So with that being said, let's dive in. And just so you know, Tessa and Nina are here along with other Travel Foundation people, and we'll dive into conversations a little bit later in the mix. Okay, okay, creating mindset for climate action planning. This is our purpose, to give you inspiration for climate action planning and help you create a mindset to enact change continually. Okay, so a few things, few disclaimers. Although I'm a scientist, I am a human first and a forever student first. As this climate space evolves continuously and exponentially, we're forever changing our mindset. We're forever learning new things. And so my first disclaimer is that this space is messy. It is far from perfect. We have no great answers that universally apply to all. And so what we're going to be talking about today is just the hard-won wisdom that we've collected over time. In that same way, this work, especially climate action planning and tourism, where there's not many examples of how to do this effectively, this work requires a lot of courage. I applaud you for showing up today and even just engaging in this conversation. And then the final note that I will say is I personally focus on climate action, not on sustainability. My guests today will probably have be on the spectrum of that a little bit more, but that is by far the filter through which I am presenting everything. So for the next 10, 15 minutes, I'm just gonna briefly dive into how I would recommend approaching your mindset for climate action planning. I hope you don't actually get to hear me talk too much because I really wanna dive into this conversation with Nina and Tessa. Okay, so setting your mindset. Okay. just wanting to, I am moderating the chat. I mentioned this earlier, but before we dive in, if you have any questions, drop it into the chat and we'll be able to either respond to them in the moment or in conversation later. Okay. So I want to start out this mindset talk with this story. And it's between a grandparent and their grandchild. And the grandparent says, "A fight is going on inside of me. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is anger and envy, sorrow, regret, greed, guilt, lies, ego. The other is joy and peace and love and hope, humanity and kindness, truth, compassion. The same fight is going on inside of you and inside of every other person too." The grandchild absorbed what his grandparent said and asked, "Which wolf will win? The one that you feed." That, in a nutshell, describes the mindset that we need to have for climate action planning. It just describes the mindset of all of us currently living on this earth today. And when dealing with people, it's really important to remember you are not dealing with creatures of logic, but with creatures of emotion. And in climate, that is where it begins and ends. Unfortunately, at least in my opinion, from as a climate scientist. So climate action planning requires emotional maintenance. The words climate change are trigger words that evoke these really strong feelings. We predominantly hear climate change talked about in terms of catastrophe, in terms of the world ending, or destruction and the way of life as we know it being very difficult going forward in the future. This leads us to disconnect and to dissociate and to become complacent. It's a really hard place for us to hold. In the brilliant words of Katharine Hayhoe, the biggest challenge that we face is not science denial. It is a combination of tribalism, complacency, and fear. And it's really this survival thinking that we need to get over to begin the process of climate action planning. So, survival thinking versus creative thinking. Climate change and the climate communication that surrounds it triggers our survival brain. So the fight, flight, freeze response that we feel when we really can spiral into these deep, intense emotions around climate change. When we really think about the overwhelm and the catastrophe and, the fear of the unknown going into the future. The problem with this type of thinking is that it turns off the parts of our brains that are responsible for the problem solving and the creativity and the learning, which are all the things that we need for climate action planning. And if that part is turned off and we're really into the survival, we can never get past the hurdle of those emotions. And over the long term, this fight, flight, freeze response will really cause us to disconnect and dissociate. And it makes it hard to even step in and engage. So our solution going forward is to overcome this and tap into new ways of thinking, changing our mindset. Now, the importance about survival thinking and climate action planning, especially in tourism, in your organization, when you're thinking about just creating a written document that you're wanting to share with your stakeholders and use as a pathway going forward, it's really important to plan for how other people are receiving climate action and climate solutions. Like, this type of thinking is everywhere. It's in our families, it's our bosses have it, our colleagues have it, the people we manage have it, the people who will be reading your climate action plans will have it. And so being able to account for this type of thinking allows you to then help everyone move past it and into that more creative problem solving approach. So I like to think about climate mindsets acting like a fractal. So a fractal is a pattern that repeats with time and can grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And it can start at a very small, minute scale and grow to the size of the universe. And in the same way, this climate mindset, it starts with you. You're the fractal, you're the first repeating pattern. And it repeats out and gets bigger and bigger with time. And one of the ways we can change and shift this mindset is to cultivate our climate fun and humor and joy and optimism. Now, this is not to bypass what we're currently experiencing and our realities, but it is to help get us unstuck when we are in that space of overwhelm, of fear, of anxiety, of dread. So I just wanted to share with you this really delightful, fun story that I use all the time to shift myself out of this. And it's about uh, fish and creatures in the ocean and how they make music. So some really creative scientists took a microphone, stuck it into the ocean, and listened. And they measured the sound and the noises that the ocean made when there was no human activity. So at night, when it's just the waves and the animals. And what they found is that, and more than one group of scientists has found this, but what they have found is that fish, crabs, shrimp, little crustaceans, they all create music, these rhythms of sounds that they will create in certain moments. And not only do they create music, but they create music based off of the lunar cycles. So some will make music to the full moon, some will make music to the new moon, but they all create and make music. And not only that, but if you take that music and you play it for restoring coral reef, it's more likely to regrow and engraft. Now, I find this story like special and magical, and anytime I feel overwhelmed or dread, right? Like I can tell myself it, I can tell somebody else it who needs that type of spark as well, and it can shift me out. And so it's stories like this that I recommend you cultivating to be able to shift from these moments of uh, these more intense moments of anxiety into lighter moments to then bring us back into like the magic that and creativity that's in the world around us. Okay, a solution I recommend: cultivating your inner scientist. If any of you have ever done science, are a scientist, did biology, even played around in the kitchen a bit, the first and primary lesson you learn is 99.99999% of everything you do fails. And you get really, really good at failure. It can become fun. It can become curious. It can become how we evolve and learn and grow. And that's the scientist mindset, is to try something, fail at it, learn from it, try it again. Always bringing curiosity. And this is how we'll be able to overcome the perfectionism and that fear that keeps us stuck, is by really cultivating a tougher sense of failure and losing some of the fragility we have around perfectionism. Also, as a side note, this is by far the best way to overcome imposter syndrome. If you're feeling like you don't know enough about climate change or what to do or don't know how to talk about it, like just cultivate that inner scientist. Another solution is to give yourself permission to be wrong. Now, This is a great story that I read in the Times earlier this fall. And it's about a woman about 30 years ago who spent, like, in her summer months between university, she spent the entire time planting trees to try and regrow the forests in her hometown in Canada. Now, I think she said she planted like thousands of trees every summer for like maybe like 5, 8 years. And now, flash forward 30 years later, what she's found is that all those trees she planted actually have created a scenario that's really contributing and feeding into the wildfires that are occurring in Canada. Now, was she wrong to go and plant trees? No. Is this a problem? Yes. But this is, again, speaks to that climate mindset, that ability, that willingness to try, to fail, to activate yourself and to grow into a place you don't even know exists. Solution: forgive yourself and others around you when you're wrong, when you don't know how to do it, when there's a better way to do it. Lead with forgiveness and connection. Now, um, I want to end this with a call to action, and it's from this book called Saving Us: A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World. If you haven't read this book, I definitely recommend it. Uh, but it's this: that the most impactful thing we can do for the climate as individuals is to talk about climate change. A climate action plan is nothing other than you and your organization talking about climate change. It requires everything I just mentioned: a lack of perfection, a willingness to be curious and to fail and to try something and to evolve with time. Now, that in a nutshell is the climate mindset. From here, I would love to jump in and start our conversation with Nina and Tessa, and maybe just for each of you to introduce yourselves, like, who are you as people? Who are you in your organization? And then we can go from there. And what I will say is, as well, actually, there's a few things I would like to say. I have had the pleasure to meet both Nina and Tessa now, and they are delightful people. Like, it truly is. Like, I am excited to talk to you. Um, and if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll just kind of loop it into our conversation overall. So yes, please introduce yourselves. I don't know if either one of you want to go first. Maybe Nina, would you go? Would you start?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Patty. And vice versa. It has been an absolute pleasure meeting, interacting, and learning from Patty, and now having had the opportunity to also connect with Tessa in person and so many others in the Travel Foundation Network. I don't mean to jump ahead to inspiration, but it really has been truly inspiring to connect with this network and really meet so many passionate individuals that are doing so much work in their own unique ways and leveraging their own networks and strengths and gifts and abilities. So just wanted to start by saying that. My name is Nina Boyes. I am professionally, I'm the Vice President of Sustainability for Beyond Green Travel, which is a sustainable tourism consulting division of Preferred Travel Group. And just to quickly kind of summarize what that means. So Beyond Green Travel was launched by Costas Christ, who was one of the first ecotourism pioneers about 20 years ago. So I've had the great privilege of working with him and his wife, Sally, for about 10 years now. And really helping destinations, travel companies, hotels, and communities around the world embrace sustainability to advance on their journeys and really using the framework of nature, culture, and community as the lens through which we approach all of our work. And We were actually acquired in 2020, about 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, by Preferred Travel Group, which is a much larger travel company based here in North America, but operates around the world. So we are now a part of this much larger family. And also in 2020 and then 2021, we launched Beyond Green, a sustainable hotel portfolio that represents sustainability leadership. So really representing hotels and accommodation around the world that are walking the walk of sustainability leadership. So today we are working with Travel Foundation at the corporate level to develop a climate action plan for all of Preferred Travel Group. And in addition to that, I work again in consulting with destinations and hotels and companies and communities around the world in sustainable tourism. So that's a quick recap of professionally who I am. Personally, who I am, I would like to consider myself a curious person also. I love asking questions. I love getting to know people. I love hearing stories. I love telling stories. I'm very passionate about nature and also the ability and connection and power of food to connect us all and unite us all. So the intersection, I would say, of travel, food, adventure, and stories is really where I thrive. And with that, I will pass it off to Tessa so I don't talk too much because I know we're going to jump into all these questions in a moment. But thank you.
Thank you, Nina and Patty, for all your inspiring words here to open us up today. So good morning from New York City. My name is Tessa Lee. I lead climate and sustainability at Expedia Group. Expedia Group is a large travel company. We have a portfolio of brands, including not only Expedia.com, but also VRBO, Hotels.com, and more. We also power a significant amount of B2B business. We have a number of customers who purchase our technologies or leverage our technologies to reach their own travelers. Expedia was founded all the way back in the dawn of the internet in 1995, which is a little crazy. One of the first online major global online travel agency, and founded with the belief that travel is a force for good and for democratizing travel for everyone everywhere. And so that commitment to inclusion and inclusive and accessible travel has really been baked into the company for decades. I've been with the company for about 2 years, coming off my own decade plus career, primarily working from within nonprofits to target private sector climate action, and have joined Expedia Group really as we've started to ramp up our efforts on climate and sustainability. I think coming out of the pandemic, the whole travel industry really started to think about and recognize and grapple with our impact on the environment, our environmental footprint, and our ability, depending on how we do business, to have a negative impact or to have a positive impact with some of these issues like climate change. So Expedia Group, over the last 2 years since I've been here, we have created and released a climate action plan. So I'm intimately familiar with the trials and tribulations and opportunities and excitements of that process. That came out in September of this past year. And so now we're getting started on the journey towards implementation. And we partner with the Travel Foundation on a number of pieces of work. They've been great partners, and yeah, happy to be here today.
Happy to have both of you here. So I think I would love to start out this chat diving into your vision as sustainability leaders in this space. Not just the vision I think you hold very well for your organization around this, but also, and I would love to hear about that too, and how that's just has been maybe the road of bringing that into your climate action planning work, but also just hearing your vision beyond what you hold for your organization, for you personally.
Sure. Yeah, I'll dive in here. I mean, I think.
Thank you.
One of the things, my vision for sustainability and tourism, Expedia Group primarily, we serve leisure travelers. And I think no matter what your company is or what your role within the industry is, we think about travelers first, naturally. Or the travel and tourism industry, we think about travelers first. But one of the bits in my vision for sustainability that I like to emphasize is is how do we hold space for the both and? I think so many things in climate action are a both and. And so while we want to engage travelers, make travelers excited about going green, make it easy and convenient and comfortable and enjoyable and affordable for them to choose greener choices, I think there's a both and. I think I also like have a vision of looking at other levers, other opportunities, other benefits, other motivators for climate action. I think about the supply side. I think about the businesses who offer travel and tourism products. And I think about all the reasons beyond just sort of traveler demand or traveler experience for going green, because I don't want to see the industry sort of wait for consumer choice. I think we can move faster than that. And I think that there's additional opportunities that we can leverage and take advantage of for doing the work. So I think my vision as a sustainability leader beyond just what I do in Expedia Group, I try to hold that both and I try to look for all the reasons to go green and to tackle climate change and to take climate action as the industry above and beyond simply traveler expectations and traveler demand. Those exist. And also, you know, there's more out there.
I love that. It makes me think of, I'm a big fan of Krista Tippett's podcast on being, and she's always talking about questions to live by. And that's what you make me think of is like, how do we hold that space for the both and I think that frames climate in a nutshell is there it's a paradox in so many ways, right? um how about you, Nina?
Um, well, building off of that, you know, I think the both and, I love that. I love that term. And, you know, I think we basically have to embrace that and center that at the beginning of all of our work, climate work, sustainability work, and honestly, kind of life in general. You know, many different things can be true at once. And I think, you know, personally, when it comes to talking about sustainability and now talking about climate and climate action, I think it's really important to just say up front, you know, this is not a black or white conversation. This is not all or nothing. There is a spectrum here. And, you know, it's really, to your point, Patty, about, you know, it's really easy to get overwhelmed by the conversation, by everything that's happening in the world all at once, especially with the unprecedented amount of information we're receiving at all times today. And I think that, you know, acknowledging and recognizing up front that no one of us can, you know, change the world on our own or make everything magically better. But each of us does have the ability and the power to take positive steps in the right direction and also invite others, learn from others, co-create with others, and, you know, really advance towards the betterment of whatever we're trying to tackle. And I think recognizing that everything is a journey and that this work is a journey, not a final destination. You know, we're never going to reach the end, cross the line and say, okay, great, we've arrived, check the box. But I think finding moments to celebrate accomplishments along the way, to collaborate and really build that and foster that sense of accomplishment and gratification by progressing and collaborating. I always try to sort of incorporate that into my work because, you know, if you view things as, you know, it's either all or it's nothing, you know, you're never going to get anywhere. But I think taking those positive steps in the right direction and connecting with others that are doing the same is really where you can build momentum and have impact. And I think that, you know, building off of that also, just sort of personally, I try to also frame sustainability as more than just our environmental footprint. So, you know, of course, when we're talking about climate, when we're talking about, you know, our impact on the environment, that is a key part of sustainability and obviously a huge part of what we're tackling here. But I always try to kind of frame it more holistically. And that's why we always say nature, culture, and community are our three pillars, because it really is the interconnectedness of all three that's going to generate impact. And we really have to address that interconnectedness if we want to advance in really meaningful and impactful ways. So that's another kind of frame that I apply to the work that I do.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just writing a note on it actually because I think that the power of a reframe, right, can really, I think, uns unstuck us. Okay. Um, I'm going to use my 7:30 a.m. this morning as an excuse for for my bumbling of words, but right, like to even maybe building off of what you both said, right? The both and is used all the time in like improv, right? Like it's like that is the word you or the phrase you learn first to be able to build and engage dynamically in conversation with somebody, and being able to rephrase the parts, like the sticking points, the pain points, the the challenges as something that maybe you don't even have to address in this moment, but can incorporate more holistic aspects of your life. I think that's gold. I love it. Okay, so from here, I kind of want to dive a little bit into some climate communication strategies that you have. And I'm really curious about how you have, like, as sustainability leaders in your organizations, how have you approached talking to your colleagues and other departments about your sustainability strategies, about your climate action plans, et cetera? And I'm also really curious if you have, in the effort to celebrate failure, if you have like an epic failure and advice of being like, don't do this, or if you have something that worked really, really well and was great for engagement with your colleagues. But I'm really curious, like, how did you get the rest of your people on board? And if you have any advice on how to approach just like internal communication around sustainability and climate.
So I'm happy to go first. So I think I'm actually really excited to have this conversation also with Tessa, because I think our organizations are in sort of different phases of this journey. So I'll start by just saying, at Preferred Travel Group, we're still in the the embarking phase of this journey. So we're currently in the process of developing our climate action plan. And really to Patty's point, the first thing we realized was, if we're going to take this where it needs to go, what this can't be is just, a smaller committee of people or myself or, the sustainability people creating a plan that sits on the side and just becomes kind of a checkbox. It became very apparent very quickly that the only way to really create something that was going to actually have impact and be integrated throughout our organization was to foster buy-in from executive leadership and then from all associates. So buy-in and also engagement. And in general, I would say in my work in sustainability at large, and now I think in this climate action planning, it starts with, first of all, familiarizing everyone with what you're talking about here, making it personal. It's not just climate, which is, climate and sustainability are huge terms. And honestly, they mean different things to different people. So I think starting, and it can be very overwhelming just to talk about these huge out there terms that feel larger than life. So I think that, first of all, bringing it down to earth and really creating education and awareness and literacy, specifically around climate. So was the first step that we took in terms of creating awareness and education, just getting executive leadership in the same space at the same time, and just really starting from the basics. Hey, like, what is climate change? What do we mean when we're talking about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3? And really kind of just starting from the basics and making sure that nobody felt like, I can't say anything because I don't know as much as the person next to me. So really just starting from that foundational level and building up. And I think the other part of it too is really making it, when I say making it personal, I think bringing in stories and examples that really make climate change real to people. So whether it's connecting it to destinations that we love to visit, communities that we work with, our homes, I think that building that sort of connection of dots between what we're talking about over here and what that actually means to us as individuals, us as communities, and us as business leaders was another really key part of this conversation. So we actually just wrapped up doing our executive level training with the Travel Foundation, which went very well. And I think it really allowed opportunity and permission to ask questions that maybe we wouldn't feel comfortable asking otherwise, or, hey, what did you mean by that? I always thought that this never quite made sense to me, but I never knew who to ask. So really starting from that place of let's just put it all out on the table and let's work through this together. This isn't a race. This isn't who knows more. This is really how can we all be on the same page so that we can integrate this into our lives, into our organizations, and into our departments, and really work towards achieving, the same goal here. So we're just wrapping that up now. We're actually now, as a next step, taking this to our all associate meeting. So in January, we'll actually have all of our worldwide employees gathering in one place, and we're going to do sort of an expedited training and also collaboration workshop. Jeremy will also be joining for that, which we're really excited about. And that'll be really an opportunity to say, here's what we're doing. And now we want, first of all, you to feel bought in. We want you to be a part of this. And now we want to get your opinions, your feedback. What does this mean for you? What is this? What is a challenge you might foresee in your own departments? What are some opportunities maybe we hadn't thought of? So that's really the next step, is taking it kind of stage by stage and making sure that you're fostering that education, engagement, buy-in, and also active feedback, so that ultimately when you have a climate action plan, it's not just a document, but it really has like breathing, living ideas from everybody that's ultimately in the organization that will ultimately be the ones that are kind of carrying this forward. So I'll pause there and just pass it off to Tessa, but that's sort of where we are right now.
Yeah, Nina, a lot of what you said definitely resonates. I've done those executive workshops as well as we developed a climate action plan. Patty, I don't think it rises to the level of like an epic failure, but something that sticks with me that was a learning moment. Going into those workshops, we probably could have saved 10 minutes and a little bit of backpedaling and confusion. Just to always be aware of kind of what you take for granted. Ended up having some questions when I'm talking about, okay, our scope 1, our scope 2, and didn't realize that folks in the room not just didn't know what that was, but didn't realize that it wasn't kind of something that me and my team had made up. So kind of setting the groundwork of like, okay, these are global protocols. These are, we're following this best practice. And so that was just a learning moment for me that kind of crystallized some of, I think, these wider lessons of, we get in our own bubble when we do this work and we have our jargon and our expertise. And there were, while I was ready to explain what scope 1 and scope 2 was, I had sort of taken it for granted that folks would understand that these were sort of global best practices. And that was a question of like, so wait, who says, Tessa made this up, right? And again, like I said, we could have probably lost 10 minutes of a conversation. So maybe not an epic failure, but just one of those learning moments, those light bulb moments. Now that we have, building off a bit of what Nina shared, now that we have the climate action plan, and I mean, Expedia Group, we're got tens of thousands of employees around the world. So I don't have any sort of all staff moments to speak to. But now that we have a climate action plan, one of the things that myself and with my team and my team leadership we're trying to do is really set ourselves up as subject matter experts across the organization. And my 2024 mantra is never say no, which is basically that we're putting the climate action plan out there as a vision and as a North Star for the organization. But as folks, we're trying to bring in and create coalition of the willing and empower leaders across the business who might be looking at things like product and technology or brands, marketing, communications, our B2B side, sales, relationship management, whatever the roles are. When folks have ideas and see things that they can do, I only say no in terms of my resources and my capacity to actually execute on work, but I try not to say no to any ideas. And as we serve as that subject matter expert, we can help shape things, those watchwords, those, speak to global best practice, how the things like the difference between net zero and carbon neutral, some of those sort of technical things, like we can kind of be the dictionary, say, hey, this isn't, there's been some criticisms of these. A couple of people tried these recently, got some bad press, let's be careful here as ideas come up. But to really let those other teams own what climate action might look like for them in 2024 and where it might, and beyond, where it might sit with their strat plan. If there's some teams that say, we've got this huge thing to get over the line, we are not prioritizing sustainability this year, I might go home and feel sad, but I also say, cool, great, I'll see you in 2025. Like, good luck with your big piece of work. And so looking for those coalition of the willing and really being opportunistic instead of top down saying, this is exactly what every single person across the giant organization has to do. So that's an ongoing work of a lot of engagement, a lot of empowerment, a lot of encouragement around the organization, and really just identifying those champions who see the value of this work from within their own roles and their own business goals.
I think this is, Nina, were you about to jump in?
I was just going to add to that. One communication win or climate win, to also plug Travel Foundation, all the great work you've done with your partners, was that we actually, coming out of these executive trainings, we actually had someone recently email us and say, hey, like I was actually, I got really engaged and interested in what we were talking about in the trainings. So I went ahead and read the Envision 2030 report, and now everything is coming together, and I sort of finally understand what this means for our industry and where we need to go and how we can get there. And I think that was just such a and hey, we want all of our other executives to read this because this matters. I think just those moments of connecting the dots and just kind of like turning on light bulbs, right? Because at the end of the day, like we all work in travel, we all love to travel, we all are also, concerned about the future of our planet. So I think when we're able to connect those dots and really kind of turn on those light bulbs, people will become activated. It's just about creating the right opportunities for them to do so.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a great win. Yeah, those light bulb moments of when you see the much bigger landscape, I think can be really powerful and change making. Also, just reflecting back as you both spoke to it from different perspectives, but the importance of listening, I think from the leadership perspective around climate and sustainability, it can't be underemphasized because it is how you get buy-in. And that's the same way as like never saying no to ideas, right? It brings people along with you, so that they can eventually get to these eureka moments or light bulbs, or the understanding and literacy can then be elevated. Really, really, really great. Okay, so I think transitioning just a little bit, I want to focus a little bit more on community. In my experience, when I talk to people, especially in climate sustainability and in tourism, this work can feel isolating and compartmentalized. A lot of times, the people I talk to are like the one sustainability person, and everybody else doesn't have any idea what's going on. Does this apply to you? And if it does, how do you address it? How are you working on addressing it and overcoming it? Like, any advice on this front?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think like I said, just going to meetings and realizing how far off or how sort of siloed or specialized, let's say, climate sustainability vocabulary might be from other teams. Vice versa, I can go into like I don't know how to code a website, so I feel equally lost when people are talking about, being in a tech company, some of those things. I participate in a number of like ESG and sustainability corporate groups and networks, way beyond the travel industry, but, whether it's how to deal with science-based targets, what's happening with the SEC ruling, how to communicate stuff to leadership, share names of consultants who are helpful, those things are definitely helpful. I within the travel industry, we also participate in some peer efforts and alignment groups. I do like to say that, we're not differentiating with our competitors on climate sustainability. This is something that we all have to go faster together on. And so, I do have trust with folks at companies where, normally we might be a fierce competitor on everything else, and we get together and compare notes. And so those kinds of peer networks I found to be really invaluable, because you might be, Patty, to your point, the only person dealing with something, or the only small team dealing with something within your organization, but And actually, we have very similar experiences, company to company or organization to organization. And so I think, like for destinations, I think Travel Foundation has some communication networks. There's some online things, even just a LinkedIn discussion board. You could start a LinkedIn discussion group and invite folks. So I do find, I say every time I talk to a counterpart, it's partially comparing notes, a little bit therapy session. And we can say, oh my gosh, I know the SEC ruling, it's so complicated, or, we're all dealing with some of the same headaches, and also though can always share ideas and inspiration.
It's a really good question, and I think probably most of us that work in this space, unless you are working in a organization that is fully devoted to climate and sustainable solutions, et cetera, it can be isolating and it can be challenging, because essentially not only are you, focused on doing the work and reaching the impact you want to reach, but you're also serving as a translator and almost someone that needs to explain why we need to be doing this in the first place, and also why it matters, and also ultimately how it connects to larger business objectives and business goals, and all of that. So which is good practice, because at the end of the day, I think that, to Tessa's point, the only way we're going to reach the goals that we all need to reach collectively is if we're bringing as many different organizations and business leaders and NGOs and all these different stakeholders and communities and destinations into one place, and around the same goals, the same alignment, the same targets. So it is necessary work, but it can be, and I'll speak personally, when you're working in a room full of people that just automatically are speaking the same language, that's a very different experience to then trying to accomplish that same work and needing to be like, oh, right, like what Tessa said, let me rewind a bunch and now explain what I'm actually talking about, and also explain why this matters. And then we'll get to, how we get there. So yes, it is real. I think for myself, one thing that I've found to be super helpful is tapping into networks and collaborating with like-minded partners, that also, and bridging that gap between, people that are really focused in this space, and businesses that want to do good, but maybe need a little bit of guidance and assistance and roadmaps there. So, I think partnering with the Travel Foundation has been hugely influential in that way. And again, to Tessa's point, so that it's not just, hey, this is Tessa or Nina saying this, or this is our sustainability department saying this. Like, actually, no, this is so much larger than any of us. And actually, what we're really trying to do here is connect the dots. And I think that when you're able to provide that awareness, education, and also opportunities to really like empower and say, okay, now I get it. Okay, how can I integrate this? And then when you see those light bulbs starting to turn on, I think that's really when you're going to like start to actually see cohesion and things that you've been working towards melding together. And then you can really get to the work. So, it's not always easy, but it is necessary. And ultimately, that's where we're going to have the greatest impact, is when we break down those barriers and explain also that, when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about climate action. This isn't just altruism, right? It's not just like, hey, let's do the right thing because that's what we should be doing. It's also, if we want to be competitive and resilient businesses and communities, and have, products to sell and places to visit and communities that are thriving in the future, we literally have to do this now. So this is not just a sustainability or climate thing. This truly applies to everyone. And I think the more you can connect those dots and get people bought in and excited about it, and also like making sure they understand you can be a part of the solution. Like, we all can. This isn't just doom and gloom. There are pathways forward, and the more you create those opportunities for people to really be a part of the solution, I think that's really where things start to happen.
Yeah, I agree so much. Building a little bit on what you said, not being the only voice in the room. So I think it's just human nature, but I found that sometimes I can bring in an external consultant, if I can get a leader to be the one speaking on the panel of the conference on sustainability, and they get the talking points, but then they see the audience questions, they hear the other panelists. So sometimes, where can I find other voices, external voices, to come in and share the message? Even if they're saying the same things I am, it could be really helpful to hear from that third party perspective and those other leaders. And so using other speakers as kind of targeted mouthpieces sometimes for that internal buy-in has also been helpful, I would say.
Ah, that's so good because what a great recommendation. Really, like it takes a lot of the pressure off of you to provide the perfect answer, or also it takes you out of the hot seat a little bit when your answer doesn't fit what somebody else's agenda is as well. So really great uh, recommendation. It makes me, what both of you are speaking to, it makes me really think about in my climate consulting work. I have, I mean, I have my professional networks and with my clients and in my spaces, I do have check-ins, but really also having that place for like personal check-ins where there is safety to be able to release the valve a little bit on that, I do think is really needed in this space. It gets back to that emotional management of being able to safely talk about this, about the struggles without having the repercussions that you can sometimes have at work. Okay, so moving from community, let's go to solutions. In your opinion, what is something that everyone should be doing in the climate action planning and a solution everybody should be thinking about? And maybe not everybody, but the average travel person.
Uh, Two things. I'm going to throw out two words. Nina used one of them, resilience. And I'm biased. I was an urban resilience professional for a while in my career, but I think resilience building and seeing the opportunities, not treating everything as disaster per se, but treating things as an opportunity, to build back better from a disaster, if you will, or otherwise to build resilience. So that's one. I think using a resilience lens for climate planning. The other one I'll throw out that's quite related is co-benefits. So always look for the co-benefits. If I can talk to a procurement team or facilities team about saving money because energy efficiency, reduces your electrical bill, something that simple. It could be similar for, an accommodations operator. It's the same as we have in our own houses, be more efficient and pay less on your monthly utility bills. So looking for those co-benefits and trying to see where you might be able to get climate work done, and you don't even have to talk about it as being climate work, but it could be, marketing work or cost savings work or new revenue generation or other things, community work, social license to operate. There's a lot of co-benefits for different stakeholders across your organization. So looking for those.
100%. Couldn't agree more. I think that when you're talking about climate action planning within a larger organization, especially, I think to Tessa's point, being able to translate that into, here's what this means for your goals, here's what this means for your division, here's what this means for the future of this organization. So rather than it just being, and sometimes I don't even like to use the word sustainability or, climate. To your point, Patty, I mean, these things can rile up a lot of emotions or maybe feelings of, oh, I don't know enough, so I'm not going to go there. Or, it can be, I don't want to say divisive, but it can create distance in certain contexts when really what you're trying to do is unify. So depending on the room I'm in, sometimes I will use those words freely. Other times I'll just talk about what is it we're actually trying to accomplish here? What is the impact? What are the positive benefits? And that can be everything from reducing operational costs. It can be, gaining more support at our events because we're now tapping into these greener ways of doing things, and look at how we're partnering with local communities, like really tying back everything to the why. And sometimes the why is the purpose, and sometimes the why is just the means to get to the end. And depending on who you're talking to and what you're really trying to talk about, I think that being able to shift the conversation or the way you're narrating or facilitating that conversation to really focus on the ultimate impact and why it matters to the people in the room is really important. And I always just think about and what we're doing right now at Preferred Travel Group is, okay, we're going to start phase 1, 2024, walk the walk here. We've done our plan. We're moving to implementation. Let's, really implement what we're talking about and lead by example first. But ultimately, and ultimately, in addition to leading by example, we also see that the biggest impact that we can have as an organization is galvanizing and empowering our stakeholders and our members in our network. In our case, hundreds and hundreds of hotels around the world, in addition to the destinations and communities that we work with. So we're kind of approaching everything in a staged manner. So one is, do the work, and at the same time that you're doing the corporate level work, start building that foundation to really be able to empower your members and your other clients to become a part of this process. And creating those empowerment opportunities now is ultimately where you're going to see the greatest ripple effects. It's where you're going to have the greatest impact. So, I think that thinking about all of these different things at the same time and making sure that, you're keeping your eye on the prize, which in our case is always just what is the largest possible impact that we can have. And, through collaboration, through empowerment, through engagement opportunities, like that is ultimately why we're doing what we're doing. And it might sound cliche, but we're always talking about how a rising tide lifts all boats. But I really could not believe that is, as long as the boat is in the water. So, I think that creating all of those opportunities to really build upon the good work that we're doing as an organization and extending that and allowing others to become empowered to take that and run with it in their own sphere of influence. Like that is how you create ripple effects. So that's kind of what I'm always thinking about as we're having these conversations also.
I love it. Well, we have 3 minutes left of this call. So I guess my final question, maybe as closing remarks, I would love to hear just where something you find hopeful or optimistic. Just where do you go? What's something that makes you view the world slightly different?
So I'll jump in. I mean, I would say I have like a few different ones. One is honestly speaking to younger generations and having these conversations with them, because I am including like my 17 and 18-year-old nieces, like the vocabulary that they have and the sense of like social and environmental justice they have as a teenager like blows me out of the water. And then hearing about what their friends are talking about, climate and like what they're hearing and what their thoughts are for the future. To me, that is so inspiring, because I'm like, that was so far from my own vocabulary when I was your age. And probably I cared, somewhere. I just didn't have, the information that you have. I didn't have the resources that you have. There's a lot of downsides to being as connected as we are all the time with information. But on the upside, there are so many more opportunities to kind of like learn and galvanize and collaborate from a young age. So that gives me a lot of hope is looking and seeing what younger people are doing to really kind of start earlier and go bigger. And also I would say, honestly, Patty, to your point, connecting with nature, like when I feel completely overwhelmed by the world, there is nothing like taking, a hike in the forest or jumping into the ice cold ocean. And I think, to me, like, and this is something I always say, we tend to have these conversations, whether it's in climate or whether it's in sustainability, we have to protect nature, like it's out there. But I think we also lose back to the sight that like, well, we're also nature. So, breaking down those, and it sounds obvious, but sometimes, we talk about things in such kind of like, we're here and it's out there. So for me personally, like just being able to connect to nature and just take a quiet walk and breathe the air and feel the water is a really good reset. So that's my overwhelm hack sometimes.
Yeah, second that completely. Nature, the youth, I'll just add then to go local, to look local. There's could really, I'm working at this big global organization. We're thinking about global solutions, a global travel industry, to look down the street at one block community farm, project that's happening here in Brooklyn, for example. So to look around at the local work that's happening and see how powerful, how amazing, how impactful it can be is also helps me reset. Thank you, Patty. Thanks, Nina.
Yes, thank you both so much for the hour of your time and this amazing advice. It's been like on point. Thank you all for coming to this webinar today as well. I yes. Are you just okay? I would say that just as a final, maybe closing thought on this, our time to act is now. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to know what to do. There are so many examples now of climate action plans in tourism. You can build off of what others have done. You have the permission to edit and change going forward. I really encourage, this first step forward. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Patty. Thank you, Tessa. So lovely to speak with you.
Likewise. Thanks all. Have a great day. Cheers.
You as well.
Thanks, everyone.